Welcome to the Vipco Strong Uncut podcast. I'm Jason Impey, an independent filmmaker who directed Vipco The Untold Story, the documentary looking at the whole history of it. And I'm joined with
James Simpson, and I am the author of upcoming book about Vipco, Video Nasty Mayhem, the inside story of Vipco. And I also appear in Jason's documentary, so sooner or later you're going to be able to put a face to this voice, unfortunately.
It's a good face.
Yeah, a good face for Crime Watch, maybe. As we record this, I have just announced the pre-order date of the book, Video Nasty Mayhem. There's been a lot of excitement. It was for a time number 2 bestseller in horror film books on Amazon, so technically I'm a best-selling author. Although into nowadays terms, that could mean I've sold 10 books. And probably all 10 of them have been bought by my 64-year-old mother. Jason, his documentary will be released soon, but I won't say any more because it's top secret.
Yeah, depending on when this goes out, there is a nice physical release coming out.
But Jason has got plans. I'm aware of them. I'm keeping stump. But that doesn't mean we still can't talk about Vipco for those who are interested in both our projects or just want to listen about Vipco because they remember Vipco from maybe their childhood. And strangely, Vipco played a part in a lot of people's childhoods, mine especially. Vipco was integral to the Video Nasty scandal in the early 80s, where there was a fear that kids could see the Vipco titles, the horrible horror movies.
And dogs.
And the dogs. Graham Bright. Was it Graham Bright, the MP?
Yes, that's it, yeah.
Graham Shite said studies prove that dogs were disturbed by video nasties. And at the heart of this was Vipco because of Driller Killer. And the irony is some of these films that were banned for being too controversial or had Mike Lee be raided and now in 2019 on Netflix, Amazon, they're uncut. They're even rated as 15 films now. There's films at the cinemas that 12-year-olds can see that are a lot more controversial than the nasties. And I think the best person to talk about Vipco to begin with is Jason, who sort of was around Vipco at the end, where Mike Lee, the owner of Vipco, was going to make a film with Jason. Is that right? Or you had started making it and he took over? Was that right?
It was, yeah. It was in 2004. I made a zombie film called Zombie Village, and it was like a 40-minute zombie film. And I was being in the UK, I was really desperate to get a physical media release. And at the time, at the heart of it was the Vipco DVDs everywhere, which I was collecting and loved. So I actually went to the Vipco website and I emailed them, and I got amazingly, I got a response really quickly. It was in the evening, and within an hour, he sent an email back saying, like, let's talk. So I posted off this DVD to him, and he watched it and wanted to actually have a meet. And he was based in London. And I'm being in Milton Keynes, it was only a 40-minute train journey. So I went down to meet him for lunch near where he lives. There was a local restaurant he used quite a lot. And this was, I met him for a lunch and he had a chat with me. And he was quite supportive of the indie scene, surprisingly. And I had thought this because this was around the time he'd released Suicide and the Claw, like new indie films and a little bit different than his catalogue. And he was interested in me making a zombie film because he really liked zombie films. And out of all of his catalogue, he had a real soft spot for zombie flesh eaters. He really did like it. And he thought it'd be really cool to do one. And I had an idea about a zombie film where the disease is spread through sex, like an STI, being more in your face than such a subliminal message. So he fell off his seat at that. He was really excited by this. And I went off to kind of plan it, and I actually did do a budget sheet and work it all out, and it was going to be a fairly big production for me, and he was on board. He was going to fund it. He was going to put a fair few grand into the process, and basically he gave me the option that if it's good, he'll release it like The Claw on like the Vipco Premiere label. If it was a shit film in his mind, it was going to be on the Screen Time collection with the black case and the gold writing. So that was the deal, and I did start mapping it out, but while I had a fair few meetings with him regularly, lunches about everything and the progress, and he was quite wacky. He wanted me to get a tour bus and get shots of London and make it blatant. It was set in England and London, and he wanted to cut corners. He wanted to not pay people a lot, and he wanted to do contracts where they weren't getting royalties. He was quite business minded. I discovered later when I interviewed him, very business minded. But throughout all this, his son was actually about my age and was drastically ill in hospital with a brain tumor, and I literally started the production of the film as it all went wrong and his son passed and he closed the doors. So I ended up making it into a short, and I got it screened and I got it released on an anthology, but it was like a 10-minute short, so it wasn't what it was supposed to be, which kind of was a missed opportunity. I always kick myself about. I wish I'd have moved quicker on the project, but making a film is hard. So years and years later, because I knew him, and he is a mysterious man to a lot of people, I thought I'd try and track him down again and actually get his story told on camera, because I said there's a lot of forums, a lot of people talk out there, and they don't really know the full story of Vipco. And it's a very mythical label, a lot of rumours and stuff. So I went all out, and within about a week, I managed to track him down and find him amazingly. And I had to check it was him, but it definitely was. And to my amazement, for a very small token fee, he actually agreed to meet me and actually for me to record his story on camera about Vipco. And technically, he's never done that ever. He's had the odd, very little appearance about Nasties, but he's never really been in the public light at all. So no one's really ever heard him talk about Vipco. So I was quite amazed and excited about that.
Well, he has been in the public eye in a different way that many people might not know, but I didn't know this until you told me, actually, Jason. Mike has been in the public eye. He's even ran to be a politician as Lord Buckethead from the Vipco film Gremloids, which I think the original title is Hyperspace. Mike Lee dressed up as its main character, Darth Vader rip-off Lord Buckethead, and ran to be a politician opposite Margaret Thatcher. Was that right? Or
that is, and there's two stories to this. So he definitely was Lord Buckethead, and he definitely was in that suit. Just people didn't realise it was him, only a few. And I've heard two stories, and one from him as well. But what the gist I get is he did it, one, to promote the film. Is it a rumour that he was promoting Gremloids? But I think more to the point, and what Michael kind of said, is he hated the Conservative government because of the video Nasties. So it was actually a thing that was up to Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives, which is what his driving force behind it was, because they'd caused him a lot of issues with business. Maybe issues, in the early days it was issues with all the bans and cuts, but later down the line he used that to promote the films, that they were banned and previously unavailable and all that. But it definitely was a fingers up to politics. He was a little bit political minded with his business sense.
So Mike has sort of been in the public, not that many know. Lord Buckethead is still in British politics, it's not Mike. And actually, Jason, that reminds me, I think there's a website out there for this current Lord Buckethead, and I approached him on Twitter as well, asking if he would be interested in being interviewed for my book, but I guess he's too busy writing up new political manifestos because I've got no response.
Their political manifestos are amazing. One of the new ones was bring CFAX back, wasn't it?
You said there back in 2004 you wanted to be with Vipco because you were a fan. You did mention there, Mike said he would make a big deal out of it on the Vipco Premier label, or if he thought the film was shit, which he must have thought a lot of films were shit, he would stick the film on the 200 plus releases for the Screen Time collection. If you're a fan of Vipco listening to this, you will know what the Screen Time collection looks like, and you'll probably understand why Mike would say if the film's shit, it's in the Screen Time collection. Jason, you're a good director, so I like to think you wouldn't have got the Screen Time collection treatment.
Well, you never know, because I've got to admit, like with the stories that you hear with Spookies, when he's involved in a film, he comes up with some quite wacky ideas.
Yes.
And he definitely wanted involvement in my film, like in the edit process at least, for sure. And which is what I heard he did with The Claw. The film was shot, he got involved and changed it. I was walking my dog one day and he did phone me, and I was like, blimey, Mike's ringing me from Vipco, and I answered it, and he was going on about this whole zombie STI thing, and he goes, I love your idea, can we show a zombie cock? And it shocked me, because obviously at the time, again, this was the era where censorship was still dodgy, really, and I thought that might cause issues. And this is a man that had many issues with the BBFC, but he seemed to be wanting to push boundaries. Actually, he wanted to make it quite like outrageous. So I don't know if he was planning on something else, because I'm pretty sure it would have caused censorship issues for him in that day.
Well, Mike wanting to see a zombie cock might be because he wanted to see a zombie nosh, shall we? We talked about this before we started this podcast, so I'll mention it here. Mike has released the film Zombie Nosh, originally Flesh Eater, but in my neck of the woods where I come from in the northeast of England, a nosh sometimes means, well, nosh could mean, get your nosh box, get your food, have something to eat, which I assume is why Mike called the film Zombie Nosh, because the zombies are noshing down. But in my part of the world, sometimes a nosh means blowjob. And if Mike's wanting you to film a zombie cock, maybe he's having flashbacks to Zombie Nosh, aka zombie blowjob.
I love Zombie Nosh as well. That's one of my favourite films he released.
And that's another thing we need to talk about with Vipco. Zombie Nosh was Flesh Eater. That's because Mike changed the name of the film because he felt it would sell better under a different name, believe it or not. And you and me have often talked about how we loved some of the mad names that Mike used when he renamed other films. I think we've spoke about The Nostril Picker, which was actually called The Changer, I believe, The Changer. But Nostril Picker, I don't know why Mike changed the name to Nostril Picker, because the killer of the film only appears briefly in the film, picking his nose once. Whereas before I saw this film, when I was a kid in the early 90s, I thought The Nostril Picker would be a movie about a man killing people as he picks his nose. And it wasn't.
I've got to say, I was a bit disappointed with Nostril Picker. I expected a much better production than that. I thought a more outrageous film I thought it was going to be.
Well, I often think if the lead character was seen scratching his arse in that film instead of picking his nose, would Mike have renamed it The Arse Scratcher?
Yeah. I would have bought that.
well, I mean, you bought it as Nostril Picker, so you might have bought it as Arse Scratcher or Todger, Tumbler. Who knows? I
bought Zombie Nosh definitely because the title excited me. I love zombie.
You thought it was about zombie blowjobs?
No, I kind of, from where I'm from, I kind of got that it was about nosh and eating, but because he had Zombie Dead, Zombie Flesh Eaters 2 and 3, and Zombie Nosh, I was really big into the zombie genre. So I was definitely a typical demographic audience that he was going for that.
Well, I assume that's why Mike changed the name of the films. People we spoke to who have worked with Vipco have told us as much, especially Jay Slater. I think it's in the documentary that you've done. Jay mentions there's the film Massacre in Dinosaur Valley. Mike doesn't like the film title, wants Jay to come up with a new name, and did that end up being Cannibal Holocaust 2?
Even it was Cannibal Ferox 2, that one.
Right, and Jay Slater said to Mike it has nothing to do with the original. Mike didn't care, and that's probably why Mike renamed a lot of other films. He didn't care, or he felt the other titles weren't as pithy, and he just wanted to cash in on the glories of other titles.
Yeah, typical business-minded Mike there.
Because, apparently with Spookies, the name for Spookies originally was Twisted Souls, but he eventually insisted that it become Spookies. Personally, Spookies is my favourite Vipco film because it's just so mad, and that's because it's got such a mad backstory as well, which we hope to cover in another episode. But I don't know if it's the same for you, Jason, because certainly Nosh means something different for you down in Milton Keynes, whereas in the northeast of England it means something different. But where you come from, do you refer to the supernatural or hauntings as the spookies, like I do?
Yeah, that one I do.
Yeah, but however, I've heard some people say that in other parts of the world, spookies could be a racial slur. But as Jason said there, some people do refer to ghosts, hauntings, ghoulies as spookies. I mean, is there any other Vipco name changes that stick out in your mind?
There was one that upset me deeply. I'm a big fan of Cannibal Holocaust, and I love Cannibal Holocaust. In fact, I first experienced that film when I was at college doing film on a Japanese. Well, it was a long play VHS with both Cannibal Ferox and Holocaust on, and the Cannibal Holocaust copy had Japanese subtitles. It was a very next generation copy, and it was a real experience. What really excited me was a while after seeing that film is Vipco released it on DVD in the UK. I was like megally excited that it was getting a DVD release and I could get it from HMV, and I got myself a copy. And it was cut, obviously, but it wasn't heavily cut. It was just under 6 minutes, and it still had the same impact on me. It was still a very, very powerful film, and I still loved it. I was such a fan. He released Cannibal Holocaust 2, so I was like megally excited. But obviously, that was a title change for Green Inferno. And when I watched that film, that really was like an Indiana Jones cannibal film, and it had hardly any cannibal activity in it. And I felt very shortchanged. I was very disappointed and upset when I watched that. And it doesn't often happen with me. I'm a big fan of film. I take a lot, but yeah, I'd have to revisit it. I know 88 Films have released it under its original title, Green Inferno, which I have picked up. And I think I was just disappointed because I was expecting something along the lines of Cannibal Holocaust, and what I got was some adventure story, which wasn't really what I was expecting. So it worked for what he wanted. He got a sow, but it wasn't. I was left a bit with a bad taste in my mouth after that one.
I think that's why maybe over the years a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some people don't have fond memories of Vipco because Vipco, the same thing really. Vipco would change the name of the film to something unrelated and people would buy it and they would be disappointed. From the sounds of it, that didn't put you off when you bought Cannibal Holocaust 2.
No, that's a rare one in so like a lot of the title changes worked for me. Like Zombie Dead, I thought was a very cool film, and the title was great for me. I actually think I prefer Zombie Dead than Burial Ground and Nights of Terror. I think Zombie Dead suited it more and it worked for me, so I think he was onto a winner with that one.
Well, Mike, just being very plain there and making it obvious that the zombies are in fact dead in that movie.
Yeah. It's such a silly, fun title. I just love it.
Jay Slater mentions it in your documentary. I think he might mention it in my book, which shows how much of a memory I've got for writing my own material. But Jay Slater, who used to work for Vipco, has told us both about a time when, again, Mike Lee said, what's this Nights of Terror? What's this Burial Ground? I need a different name. I need a better name. Jay Slater was adamant, let's keep it as the name it's being released as. It's got an audience already for that name. And Mike Lee shouted, Zombie Dead. Jay Slater said, well, that doesn't make sense. They're already dead, so does it mean zombie? Mike Lee just said, call it Zombie Dead, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Mike thought Burial Ground was a silly title, and Jay literally goes, well, Zombie Dead's a stupid title because they're dead. It's like Zombie Dead, they're dead. So it's like, but yeah, no, that one was all right to me. I didn't mind that title change, and the Zombie Flesh Eater ones are kind of all right for me.
Yeah. Oh, well, didn't he do that around the time he lost the rights to Zombie Flesh Eaters?
Yeah, so he was
trying to catch up, as it were, for lost time.
The Hand Returns. I mean, Zombie Flesh Eaters is my favourite zombie film of all time. So number 2 and 3, or technically not 1, 2 and 3, are not, they're nothing compared to what that first one is. Yeah.
And the
second one's fun. It's like Power Rangers on ecstasy, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, again, I forgot what I've written in my own book, which, please buy, despite the fact I can't remember what I've written. But in the book, either it's 4 Zombie Flesh Eater 2 or Zombie Flesh Eater 3, I do mention that the zombies in that movie fly around like Power Rangers. Yeah, just flying around the screen, left, right, and centre. It's a bit of a mad film. But actually, going back to Mike changing the name of films, one that stood out in my mind the most as a kid. Obviously, as a kid, I didn't know it was a name change. I just always assumed this movie was called this name. But in the early 90s, when Vipco released Prozzy on VHS, seeing the film on the shelves of my local HMV and Virgin Megastore, a film called Prozzy, I may have been 9 years old, but again, this 9-year-old kid knew that prosy meant prostitute in his neck of the woods. And I thought prosy would be an amazing film about some prosy killing blokes with her you know what. And it wasn't. The thing is, though, I've seen prosy since then, obviously. I think it's a great film. Bit boring places. Suzanne Love's accents are terrible. And then it's about London Bridge in Arizona. But prosy was actually Double Jeopardy, and I think maybe Double Jeopardy was saved from obscurity in this country because of the fact Mike gave it the madcap name of prosy.
I think prosy is a much better name than Double Jeopardy, and it definitely got my attention. And I do remember that case very well, and it is iconic. And I'm like you, it caught my attention. I was definitely like, I've got to see this film, prosy, man. It's, it sounds exactly up my street. It's real grindhouse exploitation trash.
And it's a mad film, but the fact that decades later, 88 films released it on Blu-ray as prosy shows that maybe some of these creative decisions films, because would maybe 88 films have looked really bad if it hadn't been the Vipco title, or if it hadn't had the eye-catching name prosy? Who knows?
He certainly put his mark on film history, because they also released Zombie Flesh Eaters 2 and 3 as well, haven't they? Under the title Zombie Flesh Eaters 2 and 3.
Yeah,
so, his titles are stuck.
Strangely, they didn't release Burial Ground as Zombie Dead, but if they ever try and get hold of the rights of Zombie Nosh, I am excited to see that on Blu-ray.
Yeah, no, I hope that film does resurface, because that's one hell of a film. That.
I think it's a terrible movie. I can see why people are excited about it, because it was obviously by Bill Hindman, I think his name is pronounced, he was the first screen zombie in Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and 20 years later he made Flesh Eater, aka Zombie Nosh, and it's basically him as that zombie again for a film made on next to no budget. And probably the highlight is seeing Bill Hindman as a zombie sexually molest a woman in a shower for much too long.
yeah.
Which is probably why Mike signed it up.
It ticks all the right boxes for a sleazy exploitation film, so I could see why he wanted that on his catalogue. But he wasn't a big fan of a lot of the films he released, though, which I was a bit worried about when I first put his interview on camera. He really did not like some of the films I really liked, and like he hates House on the Edge of the Park. He didn't really want to talk about that. He just said that was a horrible, horrible film. It was nasty. He sold it. New York Ripper, he hated as well, and these are two films that I love. You
love Suicide, which he hated, apparently.
Yeah, I love Suicide. I think Suicide was a really original, unique film. Very different for him. I think the only reason he said it was a horrible little movie and it was crap and didn't do nothing for him, but I think a lot of the problem there is it just didn't sell very well. It was probably his worst seller ever. So to him, it was just disastrous. So he hated it. I think it was ahead of its time. I just think indie film wasn't as big back then how it is now, and being a German depressing film subtitled and the catalogue he already had, it probably was out of place. So it didn't have the best chance in life over here, but it's kind of a lost, forgotten film. I say a lot of people I talk to just don't know this film at all. So I recommended it to a few people, but yeah, it's a bit of a lost classic to me.
Well, you recommended it to me, and I do remember seeing the Screen Time sleeve with the bile yellow word suicide, and I thought, that sounds insane, a film about suicide. I was only young. But I had never watched it until you told me to, and I found it on YouTube, thankfully for YouTube, because I think Trauma have released it on DVD in America, and they uploaded it to their YouTube channel. I watched Suicide. It's a very bleak German film, as you said, but it's just basically these people who film suicidal people committing suicide. But I think as the film wears on, they assist people in the suicides as well, or push them to commit suicide, and it ends with quite a shocking scene where someone jumps in front of the speeding train.
It is a bleak little film. It's a very depressing film, but it's one of those rare films where I watched it years and years ago and it stuck with me. I remember it as clear as day, and it just stayed with me for many years. So it was very impactful, and I like a film that leaves an impact on me, really. And to be honest, it's thanks to Vipco and Michael that I discovered that, because I got really into Vipco and was collecting the Screen Time collection and loving their releases. That's kind of how I discovered it. So really, he opened my eyes to. It was one of the earlier indie films I experienced on that kind of scale, the way it was digitally shot and a low budgeted effort. So it was, and like being a modern low budget digitally shot film, he kind of opened my eyes to that world of cinema. So I have a lot to thank for that. Really, it was that film influenced me a lot. In fact, I made a film called Homemade 2, The Footage, and looking at it, I obviously was heavily inspired from Suicide. I definitely was very inspired by it. So it left a lasting impact on me as a film lover and maker.
Suicide, the press duties for Suicide were actually handled by Jay Slater, formerly who used to write for Dark Side magazine, but also worked for Vipco. And doing research for my book, I mentioned in passing Suicide, and Jay Slater mentioned something about a press release, and then I think it was Mark Morris, and I was talking to Mark Morris of who used to be of Salvation Films, but Mark Morris, and I was talking to Mark Morris for the book. He actually mentioned in passing he had an old Vipco press release, and he scanned it, sent it over to me, and it was Jay Slater's press release for Suicide, which is included in full in the book. Because I think it's under the press release is under the name Shock Cinema. Is that right, Jason? Because you said I didn't know this.
It is, yeah. Jay wanted Michael to release it under a different title because he thought, like I was saying, it didn't quite fit his catalogue, and he wanted to push the film as best as he could because he really liked the film as well. But as a typical Mike style, he released it under Shock Cinema, but it had Vipco written all over it. Like the logo design, the case, the whole package, it was very similar. You could tell the same people of Vipco were behind that, really.
And then a couple of years later, when he clearly didn't care, Mike re-released it as a Vipco title on Screen Time.
I mean, Mike told me, like, obviously he was just doing it for money, to save money, and put them all out, and said he got away with it. But I think Suicide ended up on there because I think obviously what happened with that is what he said would be the situation in my film. If it did shit, that's it. It's just going on the Screen Time, no frills collection. So and we all know, as we say, like Suicide it bombed badly.
Yeah, well, it could be one of those things where, like some of the former Vipco titles in the decades since, they're finding a new audience. I've certainly fell in love with Suicide because of you, word of mouth. You told me about it last year. I watched it last year on YouTube. I went and got the DVD second hand. I originally it wasn't going to be included in the book, but I thought it has to be included in the book because it's such an interesting film, especially for the era of Vipco, as it's one of the few indie films Vipco took a punt on, and it's so out of the blue for Vipco, and it's in a part of the end era of Vipco that not many people know much about. So I think Suicide, maybe the film's legend could grow thanks to our efforts with any luck, the Suicide Appreciation Club. I
think it's a shame because Suicide is so bad, it put Mike off of actually doing more indie films. So I think Suicide probably was the beginning and the end of indie films. Even if Vipco had carried on, I don't think they would have put many more indies out, because I know they did The Claw, but Mike also did moan about The Claw, saying that didn't do very well for him either, and he was a bit pissed off at the performance of The Claw. I think it did better than Suicide, but not much better.
Yeah, well, The Claw, I'm assuming some people listening outside of you and me, Jason, have seen The Claw. I personally think it's a terrible film. I don't know about you. I mean, you've seen it. What were your thoughts on The Claw?
I think it had potential, and probably the original version was good, but I think Mike's interference made it a bit of a joke and a bit too far out there, really.
Well, you told me that he made changes during the production. He was adamant script changes were made, characters were inserted, budgets were spent in certain areas of the film, so other parts were lacking, and there's a character in the film that becomes possessed, and that character solely exists because of Mike Leigh's insistence. And I've told Jason this earlier, he laughed, he must have forgot, but there's a line that character says, and the line is, "Suck my pussy." And apparently was out of the mouth of Mike Leigh. Mike Leigh insisted. There's another line on there, controversial, funny line in there. I'll leave that for you to listen to. But if you've never seen The Claw, it's worth just watching for somebody shouting, "Suck my pussy."
It's I mean that is typical Mike Leigh, and he I did ask him about The Claw actually when I was having lunch meetings with him, and he actually said he enjoyed being involved with it. He said how he was responsible for the film being what it is, and he got really involved and enjoyed it. But he basically said that they had a film shot and he recreated it in the edit. He got them to literally do a whole new film for his specifications and tastes, which really I think he was doing it because he just thought what he was doing would sell better and be a better film. But I think he was probably damaging and harming the film. He was looking at it from a business point of view, not an artistic filmmaker's point of view. So, which again is a similar story to what we've touched on about Spookies. That's where all that went wrong there, I think, as well. So It was the same disastrous attempt, really.
Well, The Claw was originally called One Hell of a Christmas, and I think it might have been released in some countries as One Hell of a Christmas, which I think they even reference in the film. But The Claw, as the title suggests, is about a claw. The characters in the film make a lot of references about how expensive this claw cost them. It's got mythical powers. It's really expensive, and it looks like it's falling off of a dead turkey in Tesco's. But if you can find out and see The Claw, it's for completists only of Vipco. But we were hoping to use this first episode to talk about Vipco in general. And we've talked a lot about stuff like the name changes and Mike's marketing ploys and even his politics with the Lord Buckethead fiasco. But Vipco started off in the late 70s, believe it or not, when Mike Leigh was just an electronic salesman in a high street retail chain called Lasky's. And from all accounts, he decided to start selling VHS when he noticed he was selling a lot of VHS and VCR players for the people he worked for. And I assume, Jason, you've seen that the original films that Mike would release at Vipco, because he released 4 to begin with. A lot of them smut.
Yeah, I mean, the first ever thing he released was a video, an introduction to badminton, which is a bit of a myth on the circuit. I'd heard about it. I knew it had a green case, and it was just generally a specialist video, an introduction to badminton, as it says, literally is what it says is what's on the tin, sort of thing. And I know people struggle to find it, like completists, and they really want to get it. From what I can gather from talking to Barry Gold, who was his wholesaler and stockist, is that they actually didn't sell any at all. It was like terrible, probably worse than Suicide and The Claw. He actually made Michael take these videos back when he came with a new batch of films he wanted to try his hand at, because he just said it was terrible. And if he wants him to stock the new stuff, they'd have to take it back. But yeah, you're right. Apart from the badminton one, when he got into film, the first 4 were soft porn in this country.
Cage Women, Bed Hostesses, Sweet and Sour, and I can't remember the other one. It might have been called Young Success. I can't even say the word.
Young Seducers, yeah. Bed Hostess. Hot Sex in Bangkok.
No, I've never been to Bangkok, Jason. Don't mention that, please. But maybe Zombie Nosh in Bangkok will do for a sequel. Those were the first 4. I mean, I know you're a big... Obviously, we both collect Vipco titles. You've got a lot more than me. Have you got any of the original 4 on VHS in your collection?
So I've got most of the films one way or another, but I don't have the Vipco releases to them because they only came out on video and they're bloody hard to get and very expensive. However, I have been to a few people's houses to do interviews that have got a collection, and I did go to an academic's house who helped me with a documentary, and he has a very extensive Vipco collection. Had 3 of those on video, one of them in the old carton sleeve, and they're incredible to look at. And I filmed them all and was looking at them, and they cost him a lot of money. He spent a long time trying to get them, and he departed with hundreds of pounds for each of these videos. So that they're very hard and very expensive. The films themselves can be picked up like on Blu-ray these days and that, but getting original Vipco releases, it's like the badminton video, they're just ridiculously hard to get.
Yeah, well, I think many months ago, I even shared this with you. I found on eBay Caged Women, the carton case Vipco release.
Yes.
It looked like it had seen better days. I bidded on it. I was bidding on it. I was determined to win it. And then at £56, I thought, this is too much. I've got a baby on the way. And I think that auction ended for like £100 for that one videotape.
It's insane. It is really insane.
But yeah, those were the first 4 titles. I think they were released at £20 each or £22 each. Didn't sell that many, so Mike thought horror films seem to be quite interesting, seem to be selling when I talk to people about videotapes. That's how Zombie Flesh Eaters came to be for Vipco. And I think we should end that there for the first episode, Jason, because we have plans to do a full episode on Zombie Flesh Eaters, and I think that should be the lead into the next episode.
Yeah, definitely. Because Zombie Flesh Eaters was a landmark film for Vipco. It was groundbreaking, and yeah, there's a lot behind. I mean, that's the face of Vipco, really, that film alone. So it's a good place. Because I know basically Martin Myers spoke to me on the documentary, who's Michael Myers' son, and that is Michael Myers, as in the killer from Halloween. He's named the killer is named after Michael Myers, and he was a film distributor in the UK, and he's the one who gave Michael those first 4 porn films to kind of test the water to see how he was going to do. Because Martin Myers was friends with him at school, so that was his link. And he tried him with those films, and then he gave him Zombie Flesh Eaters. He licensed that to him to use, and yeah, as you said, the rest is history after that film went out.
Well, you mentioned Barry Gold there. Barry Gold told me that he only agreed to stock or distribute Zombie Flesh Eaters if Mike promised to buy back the stock for the other titles. So I think that shows you right there that this one title, Zombie Flesh Eaters, at the very early beginning of Vipco, it very nearly didn't happen, and I think this would be a very great way for us to wrap up the first episode, because the second episode will be all about Zombie Flesh Eaters, and as you can imagine, it's probably going to be a big one, as it were.
Yeah, that is a big one.
I've been James Simpson. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is @VipcoBook. My book is Video Nasty Mayhem, available now for pre-order on Amazon. And Jason, have you got any plugs for yourself?
I am, yeah. I'm Jason Impey, and I'm on all the platforms, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me as Jason Impey on all these. And the Vipco documentary does have its own Facebook page, Vipco The Untold Story, which I will post on there about the updates regarding releases and screenings and further edits and anything like that. So if you're interested in seeing these people talk on camera, follow there for sure. And yeah, it's been a good one, and I'm looking forward to Zombie Flesh Eaters, because I say it's my all-time favourite zombie film, actually.
Well, thanks for listening. Bye from me and bye from Jason.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Speak to you next time.